I guess that means I get some screen time now, Alonso.
That's what it seems like, Chris. Okay. Does everyone see my, hopefully everyone sees my AWS Management Console. We're going to start here focusing on S3. So we're going to click into that S3 Management Console. Now, right here, I've already illustrated, Mike has already discussed what object storage is, which S3 is. So right here, you can see my account snapshot. You can see the buckets that I've already created. But I'm going to go through a quick walkthrough with everyone so that you can see for yourself the steps that it takes to get to a certain point. So initially, buckets, they're kind of like folders where you can put all your content in. You can put your object storage into these buckets. One thing about buckets is that you have to understand is that when you create them, it has to have a universal naming convention, which means there's no other name like this on the planet. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure about it, that you have up to 63 characters to create these naming conventions, and it can only use dashes or dots, no other type of special characters. So I'm going to create a create bucket for you right now, and we're going to call it Google Cloud Careers Bootcamp Bucket. And I am in the East 2 area in the great state of Texas. So where we are right now is that when it asks you to prompt if you want to block public access settings for your bucket, you have to do this. Otherwise, everyone that you ever thought possible, the entire world can access all of your content within your bucket. So you want to make sure that this particular check mark is checked so that you can ensure your security. Bucket versioning. So this is a real fun piece that I really like. So say, for instance, as a former marketing creative, we always did varying versions of creative pieces. If you create a certain file and you have to adjust that file and it's going to be different, you're not going to be writing over the same file over and over and over again based on those iterations. So when you enable versioning, you can create a certain file and then you can create the same file but with a different look, and you can upload it into S3 and it will still provide the same naming convention but a different version of that, so that you can always keep incremental track of what you upload into the bucket. So you can also disable or enable encryption, which Mike will get into that later on about the different encryption practices that S3 has available, whether it's server side, customer side encryption, and how we can create that therewith. So now we're at a point where we can create the bucket. So now I've created GC's Google Cloud, oh my goodness. GCC Bootcamp, which is the actual bootcamp that I've made, bucket that I've created. So we can go inside the actual objects. Now we have an opportunity to upload certain content here. So what I'll do is that I'll add some creative pieces that I've done previously, or some files that I've made. For the Go Cloud Careers bucket. And so we have the actual logo right here in both JPEG and PNG form. So we're going to take those two pieces and we're going to add it into the Dropbox. So now I just clicked and dragged these two items right here into the folder, and now I can upload them. So now we have upload succeeded complete. And so we have these two files for Google Cloud Career JPEG that we can access at any point in time for any other examples or anything else. So now I can add the same item because I added versioning, and I can go and upload something else. So let's go back into the Google, I'll keep saying the same thing. the Go Cloud Careers bucket, and we can upload some more content. So now I can add files. I can go back to this particular bucket. And let's go and upload the same thing. So now right here, you can look. And you can see all the information about where your S3 bucket is, or where your content is within this particular bucket. You can focus on the region, which is where I put it. You have your S3 URI, which you can use for pre-signed URLs. You have your Amazon resource naming convention, and you have your object URL again right here. And so we can click on this. So now you notice that once I clicked on it to try to access it, because we blocked it off to the entire world, we have access denied. So it has that real solid encryption, so that you can make sure that all your content within your buckets are secure. So let's go back to our Go Cloud Careers bucket. So right again, we have our properties. We can enable, or we can suspend, the options for S3 based on what if you want to write over things or if you can't. And then you can also add another layer of security with multi-factor authentication. Now, using this, you can modify these settings using command line, or you can use software development kits or APIs to do so. Now, keep in mind, an MFA is very similar to what you would use when you initially have a AWS account. You set that up as another means of not only accounting and authority, but create that layer to ensure that no one else can get into your account. And you have different variations of using MFAs, such as Authy or Google Authenticator, or you can actually use Microsoft Authenticator rather.
I think I'm seeing more labs. So Alonzo, why don't you come in, do a nice lab with everyone, give everybody a chance to play with the tech, maybe get a little excited about the tech, have a little bit of fun, and then I'll go back to what I'm doing is loving teaching. So Alonzo, you want to do that first lab?
That sounds like a fun thing to do. Now, everyone, if you all are ready, if you all are on your VPCs, already in your AWS account, let me know. I'll give you just a few moments, and then we'll start jumping into the EC2s.
Sounds great. Alonzo will do a nice 10-minute lab. Then we're going to get into content. We're going to have a party. Then I'm sure we'll do another lab. So I'll turn it over to you, Alonzo. So which lab you're going to do? Are you going to set up the EC2 instance amount of EBS volume, or do you have an S3 one? What's next on your list?
What we're going to do is that we're going to spin up an EC2. We're going to spin up a EBS volume. We're going to attach that EBS volume to the instance, and then we're going to SSH into that instance on the command line.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So I hate the term instance, and I hate the term EC2. The reason I hate the term EC2 is Elastic Compute Cloud doesn't mean anything in my mind, but virtual machine is. So he's going to create a virtual machine, also known as an EC2 instance. And inside of that virtual machine, he's going to mount a block storage drive called an EBS volume. He's going to secure shell into it with you, which is going to be a party, and he's going to walk you through the configuration. So let's have some party time.
Let's go, guys and gals. Whenever you're ready, let's just everyone say go when you're ready, and then we'll begin.
I think they're ready, Alonzo. There's a 60 to 90 minute latency. So I'm going to hear I'm ready right around the time you start demoing it.
Okay, we're going to jump right in. Okay, everyone. So I'm assuming everyone is logged in onto your AWS Management Console. So what we're going to do first is I'd like to create an EBS volume. So go to your, I'm going to just illustrate it so that we can all be on the same page. We're going to our EC2 dashboard. We're going to scroll down to our EBS area. Looking for it right now. Where's our block storage or volumes? There we go. We have our Elastic Block Store. We're going to select volumes. We're going to create a volume. We're going to just do general purpose where it's just all around good thing to have. It's just, it's got the right amount of latency, reduction's got a right amount of throughput. And we're just going to keep it generalized for our specific example. For me, I'm going to be in US East 2B. We don't have any snapshots or anything else to attach or reference. So because we have a brand new EBS volume to work with. You can add a tag, but for me, for this example, I'll add tag and then I'll say my EBS. Then I'll create the volume. Volume has been successfully created. We're going to close this window and let me know if I'm going too fast for everyone because I want everyone to get the best experience possible here. Okay.
So explain what you just did there.
What I just did is that I turned on and actually activated an EBS volume, a GPS 2, and now I spun it up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move over to my EC2 and create one. Then I'm going to attach this EBS volume to that new EC2 or VM, virtual machine, as Mike likes to call it. So now I'm in the EC2.
Hey, Alonso.
Yes.
Is there a way that you might be able to increase the view of the web browser?
Actually, I can.
Okay.
How's that for everyone?
Excellent. Much better. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So I'm checking to make sure EBS is running. So now I'm going over to my launch instance dashboard. We're going to pick the free tier. So as we're going to be using a Linux machine because it's going to work really well on the command line. And make sure, like we were discussing before, if you do have your AWS account, you're going to have a free tier for an entire year. So spin up those free resources. It's not going to cost you anything.
But like Alonso taught you to yesterday, make sure you set the budget ahead of time just in case.
Yes. Make sure it's something that you can afford. For me, this like we were referencing before, I've spun up tons of EC2 instances and a lot of different resources, and I still have yet to amount to a full dollar. So here,
Alonso, Derek asked, how did you activate the volume?
Okay, let's go back. Okay, so once I created that volume, we go through volume type, size, the specific availability zone of your subnet that you're going to put this in. We don't have any snapshots to reference, so no worries there. You can add a new tag for your specific instance, and then you're going to create that volume.
Thank you.
So right now, I am back to choosing an instance type. Then I'm going to configure that instance. We only want one instance. And then when we're creating this instance, it's very important. You see a whole lot of buttons here, but don't get intimidated by this. We're going to go through all of them or most of it and how it references our specific virtual machine. So right here in our network, I've already had my VPC created. I'm going to my personal chosen subnet, which is in US East 2B. I'm going to enable my auto-assigned public IP. Anything else pretty much after that is really not going to be in reference or in relationship to our specific example, capacity reservation, IAM roles. But right here, when we want to look at the shutdown behavior, you can decide on the moment that you decide you don't need that particular virtual machine / EC2, you can decide to just stop it, and so that you can reference to turn it back on at a later date, or you can just have it terminated immediately. So for this example, we want to just stop it. And right here with the tenancy, what we have right here is that we don't have a dedicated host. We don't have any dedicated areas. We don't have our own servers or reserved instances or anything like that at AWS. We just have something shared where this particular instance is going to sit in a subnet with other people using the same rack, if you will. And so now we're going to move on and add storage. So with this is where we have, we don't need to add, we can add a storage right here, but we're going to do it on the EBS side. So we can just reference the root version at this point in time. Add tags, name, and I like to just SSH. Bar tag right here, configure. I already pre-made a security group, so I will reference create new security group. But for you, what you would probably need to do is, for example, I have a security group where it specifically focuses on SSH TCP protocol. SSH always uses port 22, okay? But I'll cancel out of this because I already have what I need. Oh my goodness, made a mistake there. Okay, that's what it is about being live.
It happens. You have computers that fail all kinds of fun stuff.
Oh yeah, we overcome and adapt, right, Mike?
Adapt, improvise, overcome. Yesterday, we reinstalled an operating system and all the apps in an hour so we could do yesterday's YouTube live stream. And I went to switch to my backup notebook that I just ordered a week ago to try and get set up in yesterday's 10-minute break. So, yep, that's what we do. It's been said the only easy day was yesterday.
Oh, yes. So we've already selected our stuff right here. This is my SSH test. Again, we SSH TCP protocol port 22 range. We're going to review all of our selections right here. We have our instance type, a TC micro. We have our chosen security group, which is our SSH test 04, and it's going to SSH2 EC2s. These are always a good thing to reference, especially when you're new to AWS, about how and to what to look for and how certain resources know how to reference and choose throughout the AWS environment. So right now, everything looks great. We're going to launch. We already have our existing key pair. And this is so important right here, is because when you choose your key pair, you have to remember this, because this is what the security references are going to be looking for on your command line. If you don't have it, you're going to have to start this all over again. So we're launching our instance. And we're going to go back to the dashboard. So for illustrative purposes, I've set up the EC2. Now what I'm going to do is use my existing EC2 that I've already spun up and is associated with my SSH. So I'm going to start that instance back up. Let me know if I'm going too fast for everyone.
It takes a couple of seconds for them to come up. Still a lot faster than it would be installing an operating system on a physical server.
Definitely. That would be a whole lot longer.
And note why people like the cloud. Alonzo didn't go order one from Dell or Lenovo or HP. It didn't take 6 weeks to get it. Nobody had a rack it. No one had to install an operating system, cable it. It was quick. This is the benefit of the cloud, the agility. So when you hear me talk about performance of the data center being greater, it is. But you don't have this agility. This agility is amazing.
Yes, yes, indeed. So now, right now, I have the SSH E202. That is the name of my instance. It's up and running. So now we're going to move back over to the EBS. And what we're going to do is that we're going to attach that volume. We'll wait for it to attach and spin up.
Got a couple of questions. So Jeannie asked, so you skipped the instant storage and are attaching the EBS storage?
Yes,
exactly.
Okay.
And the reason we're doing this, Jeannie, is with instant storage, it all goes away with reboot. So by doing it this way, we're going to keep it after a reboot.
And then there was one before that. Daniel Green asked if security groups are instance-based.
They're more service-based. So a security group is effectively a host-based firewall. You typically use it on a virtual machine or an EC2 instance, but you could also use it in a few other places. So think of it as a service or like a host-based firewall to protect a computer or a service.
Okay, so now we're back over into the EC2 console. Okay, so now this is the point where we're going to connect the EC2 via SSH. Now I'm going to shrink my screen and I will be jumping on to the command line, okay? So usually, like Mike said before, we do not configure, we architect, we create these things. So I'm able to, through definitely lots of trial and error in my initial experiences with AWS, the command line is still a great skill to have to learn simple Linux commands on how you would navigate around and through in creating SSH connections to EC2. So I'm going to clean out my terminal. I'm going to set command documents /SSH. So now that gives me, I just basically with command documents /SSH, I have asked my command line to look into this particular folder for my PIM key. I'm going to list it, ls, it's there. So now I'm going over here and I'm grabbing through the SSH client. I am grabbing command, they call it Chmod 400, but it's command mode 400.
So what he's doing is he's changing the permissions of the file with regards to the read, write, and execute. So the chmod command for your non-Unix users, non-Linux people, is how you would change the permissions. Like chmod 777 is full read, write, full control, full execute for everyone. chmod 400 is real about giving you just enough permissions to actually get inside there on your key.
Exactly, and they always specify with AWS, least just give everybody the permissions that they need the most, no more, no less. So now I add in my using my public DNS to connect to my EC2 instance. And now we're connected via SSH.
Now you can do things like ls, which will list the files that are there, and any other kind of things that you would see through a Unix environment.
So not only do we have our EC2 is activated, the EBS is attached to that EC2 instance, and now we're able to remote access via the command line to that particular instance. Is everyone else, how does everyone feel about that particular example?
I personally think you did a great job with it. Let's hear from the audience. Love that you showed what it is. The instance, love how you showed how you mounted the VM. Prior to moving on with more content, does anybody have any questions for Alonzo or me?
I see something about logging into PuTTY. PuTTY is usually an example of where you're logging into a Windows instance. As I'm working on a Mac, that wouldn't work for me, but we can try to do something similar to that maybe later on if Mike would like to do so.
Sure. So PuTTY is just a secure cell client. We used to use it for Telnet. We also used it for SSH. See, when you're dealing with Unix and Linux systems, it's all based on secure shell. But Windows is not. Windows, if anything, is remote desktop. So Windows doesn't have the best networking tools in it, whereas Linux and Unix systems do. So all these kind of things that we typically do from a Linux or Unix systems. Now, the Mac runs BSD Unix, which is why the Mac is so stable. Until you're doing video editing things, then the Macs become very unstable very fast. And I know from experience, because I had a 16-core, $12,000 Mac that used to crash on me once a day, which is why I switched to Windows. Now my systems only crash on me once a month. So I'm doing better with the Windows than the Mac. Although I really miss, you don't do the, if you lose the key, you've got a problem. You're going to have to log back in.
You got to go through all of that over again. Now, one thing,
account, and then you're going to have to create a new SSH key to log in.
Yes, definitely. Now, when I did everything, now if I were to stop that instance and try to go back in again and use the same situation, it would not work because you have to add in an elastic IP address. And Mike, could you explain what an EIP is?
Yeah. So realistically speaking, there are times where you need a public-facing IP address or a globally routable address. And when you need a globally routable address, it must be unique. So typically, we'd go to an internet service provider, we'd apply for one through RIPE or ARN, we'd get an IP address that's assigned to us. It takes a process to get one. Now, in this particular environment, when an elastic IP addresses, we need a public IP address, we just borrow one from Amazon. We temporarily rent it for as long as we need. So when you're talking about a public IP address on AWS, they call it an elastic IP address because guess what? Stick the word elastic in front of something and you pretty much can figure out what AWS is going to name it. If it comes from Google, it's got the word cloud in front of most things. And with Azure, often you'll find Azure in front of most things. So that's kind of your way to figure out which vendor's got the service too. For Windows, almost everybody uses PuTTY.
Yes.
For Linux and Unix, it's built and baked right in.
Which SSH client did I use? Now, normally what I do is, because I'm working on a Mac, I would reference Homebrew. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that, but it's definitely a wonderful, or used to be a wonderful command line resource, specifically where you're able to use Homebrew. They'll give you a certain amount of commands that you can reference, and then it'll set everything up for you. Now, because PuTTY is no longer used, or rather, Mac does not prefer to use Homebrew because Homebrew just leaves everything wide open. Security risk, of course, especially in this day and age, basically with all the shutdowns and malware and everyone being held hostage for their resources, that's not the preferred resource. So now Mac prefers that you use get on their app store and go through this reference called Xcode.
And you can definitely use that. But yes, the terminal that comes native with the Mac, if you do nothing, is designed for SSH, just like the terminal that comes with every Linux machine you can use and you need to install nothing. He's doing something a little cooler, but for those of you guys that are there, all you really need to do is just open a terminal window and you're good to go.
Yes, yes. There's definitely two ways to do it, but definitely I prefer just using the terminal and just going for it and enjoying and just experimenting. You're going to go through a lot of trial and error, like I did initially. You're going to rack your brain, but it's really simplistic. Just think linear. From a linear perspective, linearly, I can never say that word, and just go with the process and just simplify it. Keep everything simple, and you will arrive and you'll be able to access your EC2 via SSH command line.
Yeah, anytime you've got a Linux Unix system, it's built in. So, either use as part of the Unix Linux, use PuTTY with Windows. I guess if you're with Windows, you can install the Ubuntu kernel, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux, and then use those tools natively as well, right? Because natively built into Windows and Linux. Pierre Lincoln, do you need to confirm the storage is attached to the instance or CLI? You should definitely confirm it that it's attached either through the CLI or the management console. Absolutely. In real life, you always build and then confirm. So definitely.
Yes, Mike, if I could, I would just like to show another example. If they'd like to see it, I will share my screen again.
The only health checks that I use that aren't custom made are those with load balancers, as well as those with DNS. It is possible to create a custom health check for your system and use it, but that's basically pretty application dependent. Most of the health checks that are used industrially, or almost all of them, are related to health checks via load balancers and health checks via DNS. Because I am not the sysops people or the people that do the maintenance are really good at spending all day looking inside these systems. We architecture system designers, so it's not my strength. Alonzo is also an architect, so we don't spend all day troubleshooting that as a sysops part of the world. Very different career.
So we have, remember where we SSH client into the command line, but now you can also check behind this with Instant Connect to make sure everything is running. So you can simply click and forget, and it will spin it up and double check to make sure you're good to go. So now you can see via the command line and Instance Connect, everything is good to go, and that you are ready to do whatever you need to do via the command line, which is usually the engineers. That's where we hand it over to the engineers and let them do their thing. So that's just something that I wanted to just share with you all about how